Okay. All right, so we can get started. So today, we're going to be doing just quick webinars, about 30 minutes each, about each of the blue zones of the world. So blue zones, which I've talked about in other webinars in the past, and I talked about last week just a little bit. There are these books, okay? So this is the Blue Zones, 9 Lessons for Living Longer. There's also the Blue Zone Solution, which has like recipes, etc. in it. But the premise behind these, the Blue Zones, is this man, Dan Buettner. I think he started in the early 2000s, but he wanted to investigate, there are parts of the world certainly that are known to have a longer lifespan than other parts of the world. And he wanted to investigate some of these like healthier areas to see, what it was that was leading to these longer lifespans. And not only longer lifespans, but people, when they do actually pass away at these generally later ages, they're not usually dying from the things that we see people die from in the US, unfortunately, so often, like heart disease, complications from obesity or diabetes, dementia. These are diseases that just have very, very low rates of incidence in these 5 areas. So today we're gonna talk about the first, or one of these 5 areas of the world. The only blue zone in the US. I suppose we should probably be happy that we have any areas on the blue zone list. But it is Loma Linda, which is in California. Let me show you the map. So, like I said, Loma Linda, which I had never heard of. Oops, I'm trying to admit people over Luca. I had never heard of Loma Linda until I started reading these Blue Zone books, but it's in California, which probably does not come as too much of a surprise to most of us. California is pretty well known for having being a little bit more focused on a healthy mindset. And let's be honest, their climate is typically a little bit more conducive to that kind of lifestyle than other areas. But Loma Linda, it's in San Bernardino County. It's like 60 miles east of Los Angeles. Loma Linda, the city itself, is a pretty small population. It's only about 24,000 people. But there are several unique aspects of the city, but one of them is that the vast majority of the population is Seventh-day Adventist, which is a Protestant Christian faith. And the unique part about Seventh-day Adventists is that they believe they celebrate the Sabbath on Saturday. So from Friday, sundown on Friday, all the way through Saturday, that is their day of rest, spiritual rest, mental rest. They do get out and do some physical stuff, but that's like their day to just completely, just be. And they also have some other very interesting kind of healthy mindsets, which I'll go into momentarily. But a couple of other things about Loma Linda. It was the first smoke-free city, or the first city to go smoke-free in the entire region of California back in, I think I said 1993. So pretty early on. And then it also has a well-known university and medical center there, which does make sense once you start hearing a little bit more about the region. But let me see. So what is the deal with this whole Seventh-day Adventist like lifestyle and diet? These are kind of some of their main beliefs. They really are all about like wholeness. Wholeness and health is just central to their population as a whole. It's like, we'll get into their diet a little bit more here momentarily, but it's pretty like astounding how divergent it is from your standard American diet that we talked about last week. It's whole foods. There's not a lot of the grocery stores, particularly those that are very well connected to the church, don't even sell a lot of the kind of processed foods. A lot of the stores don't sell meats like bacon, shellfish, stuff like that. So, you know, it's almost like a lot of the unhealthy choices that other Americans make on a daily basis are not even available to them. So, you know, you take the bad choices away, makes it a lot easier to make the good choices. But vegetarianism is pretty common with the population. Vegetarianism and vegan, 35% of the population in Loma Linda is vegetarian or vegan. And then a lot of people also practice or follow kosher laws. So again, it's the no pork, shellfish, no unclean animals. They won't consume any foods that come from these unclean animals. And by when you think about clean animals, you're talking about animals that only eat, you know, like grass and other vegetation. So no bacon, one of the staples of American diet, no shellfish, which, you know, you think about like shrimp, they're bottom feeders. So that's just something that's completely not even available in Loma Linda. Most people also stay away from alcohol. There's no tobacco. Drug use is not, you know, discouraged and basically non-existent. Caffeine is not quite, the line is not quite as hard on caffeine. Some people do drink caffeine still in moderation, but by and large, you know, it's not like a Starbucks culture. A lot of people do not drink any caffeine at all. And this I did not know until I started putting together the PowerPoint for this presentation. But John Harvey Kellogg of Kellogg cereal fame is actually a Seventh-day Adventist. And he created breakfast cereal, or like cornflakes was basically the first cereal that he created, and he made it a big part of just kind of the standard, you know, breakfast diet in the US. The reasons he created these cereals, you know, cornflakes is a relatively, I don't know if I want to use the word bland, but it doesn't have much sugar. There's not really a lot of additives there. So he actually created these cereals as a way to symbolize and discourage like promiscuity. So it was kind of an anti-sex thing, bizarrely, but hey, whatever, you know, now it's lots of Kellogg cereals are a standard part of a lot of people's diets. So why is Loma Linda considered a blue zone? What makes it so special? There are certainly other parts of the country that has some pretty healthy, you know, pretty healthy diets, pretty healthy lifestyles. I mean, Arlington, the DC area, we consistently make the top of the list for the most active parts of the country. But Loma Linda, in various different studies, the average lifespan of somebody residing in Loma Linda is anywhere from like 4 to 11 years longer than, you know, somebody in a similar phase of their life from other parts of California. They've compared Loma Linda to other cities of California as well to other parts of the country. And it's anywhere from 4 to 11 years longer on average. They also are very big on the cohesive social network. So of course, whenever, you know, church, whatever your religious beliefs are, your spiritual, your faith, that can be a very big part of your social life. And in Loma Linda in particular, because so much of the population is Seventh-day Adventist, that cohesive social network that they get from attending church, from having a pretty small population when you get down to it, and, you know, knowing each other, it's, you know, socializing, having good friends, family, these are all things that don't necessarily have as direct of an impact as maybe, you know, deciding to stop smoking, but having a really good supportive social network has been shown to be a boon for your health, and has been tied to not only longer lifespans, but also lower risks of certain diseases like dementia. They also have this rest day every week. Like I mentioned, Saturday is their Sabbath. On Saturdays, they completely cut themselves off. They don't, you know, there's no Wi-Fi, no phones. They really truly embrace the idea of a rest day. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but weekends for me, they're not rest days. Partially of my own of my own choosing. I mean, I don't let myself really rest much, but also it's just kind of our, you know, the American way. We were kind of constantly on the go. So weekends, maybe you're not working your 9-to-5 job, but so many of us like pack our schedules with other things because it's hard for a lot of us to just rest. So in Loma Linda, that's not so. That Sabbath from the sundown on Friday through all day, the rest, you know, all day on Saturday, that's it. A lot of people don't even cook on Saturdays. I'll talk about this a little bit more momentarily, but it's just, you know, 100% just recuperation. And then again, as I said, they are about 30 to 35% vegetarian and vegan. And even those people who do eat meat, a lot of them are actually just pescatarian, and they eat very little meat. Like I talked about in last week's webinar, they view meat more as a side dish than anything else. And actually the tagline, the kind of motto for Loma Linda is a city focused on health and wholeness. Now, dietary staples. So, you know, like I mentioned in the beginning, Loma Linda, they are really big on whole foods. Processed foods are really just almost not even accessible unless, you know, you go outside the city limits. So they're really, really heavy on vegetables. Beans are a big part of their diet. I read somewhere yesterday when I was working on this that there are something like 70 varieties of beans in the world. I had no idea. I knew there were a lot of beans, but I didn't know there were 70. So, you know, they make full use of those. A lot of fruits, whole grains. We're not just talking like you go to Safeway and you see a loaf of bread that says whole grain. Probably not really. We're talking like the truly whole grain bread that has, you know, like little kernels and stuff in it that you can't get kids to eat for any amount of money. The whole grains, and when they snack, you know, they snack on nuts. Nuts are a really big part of their diet, which a lot of people do try to stay away from because you know, we do still have that kind of inherent fear of fat. But like I talked a lot about in last week's webinar, those healthy fats in nuts are actually very good for you, great for your brain, great for your heart, and they also keep you fuller for longer. So I shared this quote last week, and you know, it's very applicable to Loma Linda, the whole idea of eating breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. So they load up their nutrition, their food earlier in the day. By dinner time, it's almost just a snack. And when they eat, they make it a social occasion. So there's not a whole lot of this, like really any of this, like eating in front of your computer, eating in front of the TV. You know, meals are events, and they all eat with their family, friends. If it's the Sabbath, they'll eat with the rest of the church. But they treat meals like actual just, you know, meals and nothing else. So, and you can see the breakdown here. They do also eat dairy. Like I said, there is some meat consumption, but it's the clean meats, and it's a very small part of their diet. So the Loma Linda diet has actually been called the Garden of Eden diet. The idea behind this is that because it is such a plant-based diet, this is considered to be the original diet that, you know, men and women were created to consist on. So it's kind of going back to the Garden of Eden. That's the whole concept. Of course, at least as far as we know, donuts and, you know, Doritos were not around during the Garden of Eden at times. So there's none of that processed stuff. You know, it's this difference between fries and donuts and these whole foods like these apples, vegetables, berries, what have you. But that's kind of just their overall mindset. They are they're definitely pacifist. It's a pacifist faith. So they don't believe in animal slaughter. When they do, those who do eat meat will only eat meat that's been killed. And it seems like an oxymoron, but you know, there are more humane ways to kill meat for animals for consumption. Most people do eat dairy and eggs in relatively small amounts. And like I said, those unclean meats are just not even available. Most grocery stores won't even sell them. Now, past the diet, I mentioned some of these lifestyle choices that we here in the DC area, there are certainly, I know we all try to unplug sometimes. We all try to give ourselves rest. Maybe you've started meditating or doing yoga. Maybe you've started doing more exercise during this period of isolation. But these are lifelong habits in Loma Linda. This is it's like a community habit almost. So it's something that you are born into from a very early age. This is how your week goes. You have the Sabbath, you don't do anything on that day. Here, whatever your religious faith, I don't go to church myself, but I know plenty of people who do. And, usually they'll go in the morning and then the rest of the day they'll be doing business as usual, right? Most people here don't take like the entire day of Sunday off. I mean, all the stores are open. A lot of, sports events are happening on Sundays. So this idea of having one day where we really just focus on our own recuperation is completely, I think, foreign to most people out here. Again, totally unplugging, no phones, no computers, no work, no nothing. So that rest is just all you're focusing on. And like I said earlier, a lot of people choose not to even cook on Saturday because that's considered work in a sense. So they'll just have a big potluck with whatever food they have. Some people will fast on Saturday instead of even trying to deal with preparing food. And that's also a day when typically, in that beautiful climate, it's pretty close to San Diego down there. So, if you've been down there, there's a lot of great hiking. You're not too far from the water. A little bit of light exercise, nothing too strenuous, is a pretty typical part of their week in general, but especially on the Sabbath. Now, as far as the results, seeing what this does for people, how it all correlates. So I talked about snacking on nuts. Again, it's about moderation, like a small handful of nuts. In a lot of different studies, that has consumption of nuts, 4 to 5 days a week, has been shown to lower the LDL, your bad cholesterol, and also has been tied to, with different statistics, but it usually averages out to about 50% less risk of heart disease. Having a plant-based diet that's heavy on whole veggies, whole fruits. Again, that's not like tempura vegetables, which are delicious, but that fried layer certainly doesn't do you any favors. And then whole fruits as opposed to sugar-loaded fruit drinks or like dried fruit that's been caked in sugar, just picking up an apple instead of something else. Those antioxidants are really protective against a lot of different cancers. So right now, you look at this, that's Loma Linda's got a lower incidence of heart disease and heart attacks, lower incidences of cancers. And then another part of the kind of Loma Linda diet and just lifestyle is that I already mentioned that they don't drink a lot of caffeine, if at all. Alcohol is pretty strongly verboten. So there's really a focus on just water. People more or less just, that's it, they sit down for a meal, it's water. There's none of this, like, there are no sodas. People aren't really drinking fruit juices. Certainly not, obviously, red wine or anything with dinner. So just regular tap, lukewarm water. It is really, that's all people drink, and they drink quite a lot of it. So we've talked about the importance of staying hydrated, but really keeping yourself hydrated, 6 to 8 glasses a day, depending on your level of exertion and how hot it is, can also really substantially lower your risk of heart attack and just a whole other range of issues. So the numbers are definitely there. Let's see. So if you break it down, so I said that the average lifespan in Loma Linda compared to other parts of the US is typically anywhere from like 4 to 11 years, okay? So break it down based on scientific studies. When you are focused on a plant-based diet, obviously there are vegetarians out there who are very unhealthy. So I'm not saying that just being a vegetarian is the key to success, but typically if you're a vegetarian, you are focused more on plants. So if you eat a well-balanced vegetarian diet, typically that will add at least 2 years to your lifespan. Eating nuts as a regular, like I said, 4 to 5 days a week, a small handful, has been shown to also add about 2 years to your life, or, add 2 years to your life. No smoking, I mean, anywhere from 2 to 10, 20 years. Obviously, we all know that smoking is very bad. So not smoking is really only going to extend your lifespan. Even, like I said, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever the case may be. Having some moderate physical activity as part of your weekly schedule, your weekly plan, your weekly habits. Again, that's really at least 2 years additional to your lifespan, if not more. And then having a normal body weight. The thing about Loma Linda is people aren't really counting calories. That's just not really a thing. It's, they're eating these whole foods, most whole foods, with the exception of, nuts are pretty calorie dense. Some of the whole grains can be pretty calorie dense, but these are also very filling foods. So vegetables and fruits don't have a lot of calories, and they're eating a lot of those. The things that they are eating that are pretty calorie dense, they're having just regular smaller portions. So there's not a whole lot of kind of that over the top calorie consumption. So there's not a very, obesity is just not something that happens very often in Loma Linda. So having that normal body weight, that healthy body composition, again, I put 2 years, but that could be anywhere from, 5, 10, 15, 20 years additional. Whereas if you're obese, or on the other end of the scale, keep your weight well below what your normal kind of healthy body weight range is, then that really can really mess with your lifespan. So at minimum 2 years for those last 3. So that's what, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, that's 10 years right there. And none of these are horrifically extreme lifestyle choices. I mean, I understand vegetarianism isn't for everybody, but you can be somebody who is on a plant-based diet and eats meat on occasion. Eating nuts, unless you have a nut allergy, I think objectively most people enjoy the taste of them pretty well. No smoking, I know that can be a hard one for certain people, but there are ways to cope with that. Physical activity, we're not talking about, Loma Linda is not full of marathon runners. We're talking about, a nice walk, a little bit of a hike, taking advantage of nature, just getting outside, nothing crazy. And then a normal body weight. I know that's easier said than done sometimes, but again, these are not extreme measures to take. Now, as far as the specifics of the diet, some of the most popular, some of the most frequently consumed foods in the Adventist diet are avocados, like we talked about last week. A lot of these, you'll see, a lot of these showed up in the presentation last week, and will continue to show up in the presentations about the other blue zones in subsequent 4 weeks. Avocados, salmon for those pesco vegetarians. Again, the nuts, beans, oatmeal is a big thing, not like Quaker oatmeal that has a lot of added sugar, but steel cut oats that you make on your own. Whole wheat bread, and they also eat a lot of, or drink and use a lot of soy milk. Not like the vanilla flavored chocolate, lots of sugar added soy milk, but the just plain normal soy milk. So I know we're kind of running low on time here, but let's get some ideas from you all. Like again, these are not radical lifestyle choices, but just looking over what I've talked about, what are there areas that you see that you can that you think, oh, hey, I could adopt that in my life pretty easily. How can we adopt the Loma Linda, plan of action into our lifestyles? Anybody have any ideas? How about drinking more water? That's a pretty easy one, right?
Yeah, probably drinking more water, but also we can adapt that little by little. So, like once a week, you can add or eliminate certain things. So, I grew up not drinking any gas, Coca-Cola or anything like that. Or normally it was fruit-based or water with lemon, a little bit of squeeze of lemon. But
Yep.
so probably once a week, people little by little, they can eliminate these things, especially the one that contain too much sugar, and then until adopt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So exactly. It doesn't eat from 0 to 60, right? You don't have to say, okay, as of tomorrow, I'm not going to eat anything that has additional sugar in it. It's about small incremental changes. Those are much easier to adopt and adhere to, and much more palatable. So it could be as simple as, this afternoon when you decide that you find that you're a little bit hungry and you feel like a snack, where normally you would reach for whatever cookies you have in the cupboard. Maybe you stop yourself and you say, you know what, I'm going to go to the fridge instead and get a piece of fruit. So, even one small change in a day is a positive step. And one small change leads to others, right? And once you start feeling better, especially, and we've talked about this so much, but especially the sugar, those processed foods, once you start cutting those out a little bit more, and some of us are better than others at keeping those out of our diets. I'm certainly no saint with those, but I think we will all find ourselves feeling better when we start making these incremental changes. What about, anybody see the whole idea of that one day of complete just unplugging, focusing on I see Jim unmuted himself. I'm guessing you like that, right?
Well, that's the one that's a challenge. And we're doing pretty well on the others. And I sent you a picture of the lunch that coincidentally we're eating right now. So sort of the poster child for what you were selling, the blue
Zones.
zones. Thank you. The blue zones is proving out. But that one entire day, starting on a Friday night and going all the way through Saturday. We probably do 2 half days on the course of the weekend, mostly.
Okay.
But but that would be an area of improvement and I can know from experience that trying to plow through and work 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 days in a row, I became less effective somewhere in that mix than if I just let down for at least half a day.
So how can we? I guess the challenge really is, how do you do that, right? Because we all have our phones all the time, and everybody has email on their phones and 100 notifications. So how do we do that? Any ideas? Turn off notifications for 6 hours or something, or any other thoughts on that?
I use Do Not Disturb quite frequently on my phones, either
Smart.
sometimes when I, just want to relax, or sometimes when I go to bed, I put it on so late night notifications don't wake me up. And that seems to be somewhat effective.
Okay, that's smart. Any other ideas? Yeah, I mean, it's, again, it's baby steps. Like Jim said, doing 2 half days, or even starting with 1 half day. I mean, start with a morning, right? Maybe just Saturday morning, you just make a conscious decision to do, as Lindsay said, just put on your Do Not Disturb and just don't even think about it. I know it's hard. We're all, do as I say, not as I do. I always have my phone with me, and I can always justify looking at my email or what have you. But the reality is that there's very little in life that will not wait for you to take a break, right? And right now we're all kind of not stuck at home so much anymore, but still, at home more than usual. Most of us are, your immediate family is probably with you, so it's not. Probably nothing is going to happen to them. They're probably taking some time off with you. So it's just those baby steps. And then I'll wrap it up here just because we're about out of time. But Okay, just a few ideas from the Loma Linda kind of cookbook. And I'm happy to send around the names and titles, et cetera, of the books because they are really interesting. You know, Dan Buettner goes into a lot of detail. Basically what he did is he lived in each of these areas for a while, and he kind of followed people around and just observed and participated in these lifestyles himself. So he's got a lot of really good recipes as well. But a couple of kind of swaps or just suggestions here. One of them in the cookbook is a kind of a TLT instead of bacon, lettuce, tomato, the classic American sandwich, a BLT. You know, a tofu patty. You could do like a black bean patty or something. Lettuce, tomato, using whole grain toast. You know, a lot of it's about seasoning. The Seventh-day Adventists use a lot of seasoning in their foods. Smoothies, they always seem to pop up on every list, right? But anything with, you know, a little bit of fruits, a little bit of honey for some natural sweetness, soy milk, almond milk, whatever you like. These are a great way to fill up on some good nutrients and antioxidants without weighing ourselves down. Homemade granola, I do this every once in a while. You just put a bunch in, you don't have to follow a specific recipe. Just, you know, throw some nuts, rolled oats, some cinnamon, whatever, maybe a little bit of vanilla. Throw those in the oven for a little bit, stir every once in a while, and then keep it in an airtight container. And you've got, you know, how about some yogurt and homemade granola for breakfast for a week. And then marinated vegetables. This is something that I like to do at home. Just marinate with some balsamic vinegar, olive oil, garlic, whatever spices and flavorings you want. And, you know, just let them sit for a little while and you will have a really filling, flavorful, healthy side dish or main. So those are just some ideas. But again, these books have a lot of different recipes. So I will send around the names of the books. And that is it, since it's now 3 o'clock.